Okay, recording now. All right. So, do you do you want to introduce yourself for those who don't know who you are?
Okay, I'm Maurice Séchet. I'm a lead developer of Bitcoin ABC, which is the main node software that runs Bitcoin Cash.
Okay, nice. So before we actually start the interview, I wanted to ask you for this about this tweet that you posted today or yesterday. Let me find it. Where you actually signed a message that verifies with the Genesis block. How did you do it? You used the same trick that Craig used to trick
Yes.
Gavin? Is it easy to
I'm a very strong believer on show, don't tell, right? Like you can tell people that there is this complicated cryptographic process that they don't understand to generate a fake signature, but just doing it is much more, palpable for most people.
So is it easy to explain, or for example, if you explain it to me, if I don't know about cryptography, I'm not going to understand it?
Well, you need to know some basics about the elliptic curve, but the high level picture is that if you can generate a signature, a ECDSA signature for any public key, but you cannot decide the message that is being signed, right? So as long as you don't say what the message is, you can produce valid signature.
So basically, you just proved how you can, trick anyone into pretending to be Satoshi.
Yeah,
right?
And to be fair, I did not, I'm not the first person to have done that. But I think it was good to give a bit of advertisement that this technique, so that people don't get fooled easily. It's like a vaccine of sort. Like you expose the community to some of the stuff that a scammer could do in a small dose, so that they know to recognize it when it actually happens.
I mean, it doesn't matter how much proof you show to people. Sometimes they're just blind, hey? They just don't.
Yeah, but in that case, you need to look at the cognitive dissidence and be amused, right? It still have some value there. Because now they have to explain to you what trick they used while they were defending, someone else using the same trick before. So it's quite funny. It's like a self-defeating position.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just talk about Bitcoin Cash. I'm going to pull up my Twitter here. So I made an announcement yesterday on Twitter saying that I was going to have an interview with you, and I was asking my followers to drop any questions that they had about Bitcoin Cash and the development. So I'm just going to read out some of the questions from the followers here. So the first one says, what's the roadmap for 2019?
Yeah. So the roadmap is still the same. There is no significant change there. And how much we can do in a year, it's going to depend mostly of, how much manpower we can gather during the year.
Yeah. So what's more important? What's the next thing that you're working on right now?
I think the most important big things that people are working on right now is Avalanche. It's a technology that essentially ensures that zero-conf secure. It also makes the network more resilient against 51% attack and this kind of things.
Okay, I see here it says pre-consensus. Is this Avalanche? Near instant security for merchants.
Yeah. So Avalanche is like the specific techniques, because when we wrote the roadmap, we were not 100% sure that we wanted to use that specific technique. Maybe we wanted to use, other possible techniques, but no, it seems that the consensus is converging toward using that.
It's not going to change the proof of work, eh? Because I've seen some people talking about this as well. That's going to change the proof of work.
So nothing in the blockchain change. By that, there is no consensus rule at the blockchain level that change. That being said, so essentially, have like a two-stage consensus instead of just one stage, right? You have two mechanisms that works one on top of the other. So you have the blockchain with work like it is, that is completely unchanged. But on top of that, you're going to have Avalanche that runs, that can give you consensus over, few seconds roughly. So that allows you to, roll out to ball spends and this kind of stuff. And then that it changes the incentive a bit, right? Because you cannot improve things without changing them. I mean, it's kind of a truism, but if things stay the same, they don't become better, right? Like that's not possible. So that front, it changed things a bit. Maybe Avalanche is going to be a bit different than classical blockchain proof of work. But worst case scenario, it doesn't work, and then you revert back to like the guarantee and security of the blockchain. You essentially find yourself in a position where you can improve upon what we already have, but you cannot really undermine it.
Okay, and then is there anything in the roadmap for implementing privacy, for making it more private, or this is going to be only on the wallets?
Yeah, I think it's better to either do it at the wallet level with mixing, or to also we can do stronger privacy technology as sidechains. But one of the problems if you do that on the main chain is that you cannot audit the main chain anymore, right? So what's happening right now is that you can download the blockchain and verify that there is no more than 21 million coins. Right, you can verify the whole UTXO set, and you know who has, well, who, you don't really know who, but what public key has what amount of money, and sum everything up and see that everything checks out. This is something that you cannot do with privacy coins. And on a very regular basis, you see that there is some security vulnerability in one of those coins where someone could inflate the money supply. So it happened in Monero last year. It happened in Zcash this year. It just keeps happening because it's very difficult and it's not visible, right? Because you don't see the amount anymore. So there is clearly a trade-off between privacy and security of the overall system there, the overall economics of the system. Whereas if you build it in the wallet, then the wallet can mix. So what it does is that you cannot really know which public key belongs to who anymore, but you still can validate that each public key has a certain amount of coin and validate that the overall system economically makes sense. Another approach that you can use is either sidechain or extension block, or various variations on those techniques, where you move the coins from the main chain to some other chain that have property that are a bit different, for instance, much higher privacy, and then provide the mechanism to bring the coins back in the main chain whenever people want. And if you do that, what happens is that if you have a bug in the privacy that screws up the economics of the system, then only the coin that have been moved into that extension block or sidechain or whatever are going to be affected, and everything that is on main chain is not affected. So that would be two approaches that allow higher degree of privacy while preserving the security property that we have on the main chain. It seems that people are working more on the wallet side these days, which is fine.
So another thing that I see here on the roadmap is it says extensibility, and it talks about the tokens and opcodes. What's your take on all this token economy? Is it, for me personally, I don't care about the tokens. I mean, I prefer Bitcoin to be used as money because that's what I use it for, but maybe there's demand for tokens. I don't know. What do you think?
So personally, not very involved in all the token solutions because, just someone cannot do everything. I think tokens it's one of those use cases that makes sense to use a blockchain for. So there is a bit less now because this is the bear market, but especially like a year, 2 years ago, there was like, blockchain everything needed to use a blockchain. But what you see in practice is that it doesn't make sense to use a blockchain for most of the use case that people wanted to use blockchain for. However, blockchain is pretty good at providing an immutable record, which allow to prevent double spends. So it's obviously something that Monet, like it's a problem that Monet needs to solve, because you must not be able to spend the same money twice. But it's also something that token need to solve, right? If we try some kind of token, whatever that is, you also have the same problem that you need to not be able to spend the same token twice. And so using the blockchain for token stuff actually makes a lot of sense. I think the way it's done in BCH makes more sense than the way it's done on most other blockchain. Why is that? Because the way it's done on BCH is that all the token stuff are not validated by the miner and most people running a full node. If you want to use some token solution, you essentially have to use some other software that you connect to a node, and that's going to process the blockchain. And it's all validated client side, meaning you can have information that are invalid as per the rule of your token system in the chain, and all those stuff, you're going to ignore them.
So this is different with Ethereum?
Yeah, because Ethereum, people that run a node or people who mine, they have to validate all the tokens.
Okay, what else? The last thing of the roadmap, this middle column here, it says usability. I think this one would be the most important, because usability is what's going to provide adoption as well, right? I mean, usability, I guess it's like make it faster, make it cheaper, things like that, yeah? Make it more user-friendly.
Yeah. So this is what we mean by usability, though. There is a lot of usability work that don't happen at our level, right? So we are building the node software, which is a very infrastructure piece of code, and most user, they will never really interact with most of what we do.
So the only thing you can improve for usability at a protocol level is just the speed and make it cheap, yeah? Make it fast, cheap, and secure.
Reliable, yeah. That's pretty much it. And do stuff that allow to do richer feature of it, as long as So the guideline here has been that it's fine to add stuff that add new feature, but it must not impact negatively the cache use case.
The cache utility, yeah.
Yeah. So, for instance, recently a lot of people have been talking about making Operaton very large to store data on the chain. So now that's a very different use case. That's using the blockchain as a storage mechanism rather than as a monetary system. This is probably something that's not going to happen on BCH. And the reason is it makes running the infrastructure of the system much more expensive for everybody, right? If your chain become huge, anyone that want to run an exchange or a payment processor or a miner or whoever, those people, it makes it much more expensive for them to do it. And it's more expensive not because more people use it as cash, which is perfectly fine in that case. That would be growth of the ecosystem and great. But that would be because you have some other system that suddenly make all the cash use case more expensive. That's not really the direction where we want to go.
Yeah. How is the developer mood after the split?
There is good and bad. The good is that we can focus on building and not on drama, because the split created a huge amount of drama. The people who split actually probably created a ton of drama on purpose. So that's very good to be able to focus on building stuff, and there is a lot of that is happening right now. So that's a great part of it. the part that is a bit more unfortunate is that obviously it hit the confidence pretty hard. It's it's a pretty big setback. So so that part is not great, but I think it's for the best. Like when things are going bad, essentially like you make things more valuable by building on them and increasing usage. So this is what is happening. So that makes me, it's like a short-term setback, but I think that makes me more hopeful for the future than I was before, actually.
Okay, what do you think about Jack's tweet?
Yeah, so seeing what he says, so he's also an investor in Lightning Lab. So seeing what he says, it seems more like he is using, because he's the CEO of Cash App, but also of Twitter. So he has a very big social media presence. People listen to what he says. So he's saying what he needs to say to increase the value of whatever he invested in. I think there is not much more to it than that. I mean, clearly, if you believe in what he's saying, he's a moron. If you believe in what he's saying, he's a moron, because even if a user base the size of Twitter started using Bitcoin, it would be the biggest disaster in the history of Bitcoin ever, right? There's about, I'm not sure of the recent number, but I think it's around 300 million Twitter users, right? Yeah, like, if all those people did like ever one transaction a week, that would be the biggest disaster ever. That would be a volume of transaction. Yeah, exactly. And so either it doesn't know that, but not knowing about the scalability of a product you invest in is, completely reckless, I'd say.
So another thing, I wanted to ask you before. This is not on Twitter, but how did you get into Bitcoin? When did you find out about Bitcoin, and how did you come to get into Bitcoin?
So I learned about Bitcoin. It's funny because so many people have asked me the question recently that I went back and because I remember the article where I read the first time about Bitcoin, and unfortunately so there is a French version and the English version. It's written by a Belgian guy called Plume, and he wrote that in November 2010. So this is where I learned about Bitcoin.
November 2010?
Yeah.
Okay.
I found it very interesting at the time, but like most people at the time, I was like, okay, this is cool, but you are not gonna put all your money in it, right? Because at the time it was very young, very few people were using it. It was very different from what it is right now. People don't quite realize, right? It was just like a bunch of dudes on the forum talking about it, and a handful of them were using it somewhat, but there was like one exchange and it was super sketchy. The whole stuff was
very different, yeah.
Yeah, very different. Yeah, nobody was accepting it. Anyways, I was like, okay, this is still interesting, because I was very interested in economics even before, and I was like, economically that makes sense, and the way it's done technically, it also seems to make sense. So it's probably gonna get big, but for it to get big, you need to also people to see the same thing as me, not just me. And what was the trigger for that for me was, I don't know if you were in the space at the time, but in 2012, there was the Cyprus crisis. So Cyprus is a Mediterranean island, and it had a big crisis, like most of the world, after 2008, it was crisis everywhere. And for Cyprus, it ended up by closing almost all the bank in 2012 because they could not recover from the crisis. And so people there, they could not access their money anymore. So it was very bad for everybody. And at the same time, a lot of people started to buy Bitcoin. And at the time, there was no altcoin. There was only Bitcoin, right? Well, there were a few altcoins, but like Bitcoin was 98% of the market cap or something, and then you have like rounding errors of people experimenting with stuff. Um, and so people bought Bitcoin, and what a lot of people said at the time, but obviously like they didn't think that through, is that people in Cyprus were buying Bitcoin because they lost trust in the banks, but they literally cannot, because they cannot access their money. So this is not what happened, right? But what happened is that other people in other part of the world, we are looking at what's happening in Cyprus, and they were like, if like Cyprus is a small country, so it happened there first, but maybe next time there is a financial crisis or whatever, it can be in my country, right? Or it can be in someone else's country anyway. No, it's worth to invest into some asset that is outside of
the system, and that it cannot.
Yeah, there is no line of that system. And you saw that very much. And for me, that was the sign that not only I was seeing something there, but other people were seeing something too. And because other people were seeing something too, then at this point I knew it would become very, very big.
And then you put a lot of money in Bitcoin?
That is that is my business.
That is a private question. Okay. And that's interesting, and that's very early. Yeah, I didn't discover Bitcoin until almost the end of 2013, and it was actually similar with 2017 because it was in the whole bubble. So it's very, very similar with this situation now. Well, in 2017, but yeah, Bitcoin was like 90% dominant. Yeah, there were no altcoins.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
I remember Dogecoin and Litecoin.
Yeah, there were like meme coins. And I think Litecoin was already around at the time. There were a few, but nobody were using them. Like altcoins really became big when we hit the 1 megabyte limit. That's when you got the altcoin explosion. Like when we hit the limit, Bitcoin essentially within like 2 or 3 months, I think maybe even less, went from 90% market share to about half of the market as it is right now, 50% or so.
It went to 30% dominance.
Yeah. So it varied over time, but it seems to be oscillating around 50% or 45%, like that. And before that, it was 90 plus all the time. And within like 2 or 3 months, it went from 90 plus to half of the market roughly. And it has never really recovered from that. Maybe now it's a bit higher, maybe it's 60% or something like that now. But
it stayed at 50%, and that's concerning for Bitcoin BTC, because I remember after every bear market, it goes back up to 80-90% dominance. But in this bear market, we've been in the bear market for 1 year now or more, and it can go past 50% dominance, even at this stage of the bear market. So I don't think it's going to go much higher ever again in dominance.
Well, so the problem, I've seen that many times in the past, when you have systems that don't scale, the thing is, so people react to signals that are immediately visible to them, for the most part, at least users. Maybe investor can try to see a bit further into the future, but user, they're going to use something if that works, and if that doesn't work, they are not going to use it, right? So right now there is not that much of a scalability problem, but every time you hit the roof, then people start paying high fee, it becomes unreliable and stuff like that. So some people leave. The people that leave, they usually don't come back. And I'd say this time it's probably different, because what happened is that every time you had one of those huge wrap-up, it was corresponding with a wave of adoption, right? There was a new series of services that started accepting it, a bunch of new people coming to the system. But no, it's not possible, right? So I'm very curious as to what's going to happen for the next wave of adoption. But I don't think it's going to be good for Bitcoin. But this is something that I was saying, especially because of my position in BCH. A lot of people were a bit surprised, but I did not expect Bitcoin to do very bad during the bear market for that very reason. Right? They stayed at 50% and stuff. Why? Because actually Bitcoin right now, BTC, is working fairly well.
I was going to say this. SegWit has helped, because now I look at the number of transactions on BTC, and it's almost the same as they were at the peak of the bubble. I saw it's approaching 300,000 transactions. So it went up a lot, and it's still fast. Like, it gets confirmed in the next block, it gets added in the next block, so I don't have to wait. It's more expensive than Bitcoin Cash, but it's still a few cents. It's nothing significant. So a SegWit was okay, but of course that's not going to be enough if we have another wave, and it's going to grow exponentially again.
Yeah, that's the thing I expect. I don't expect Bitcoin to do bad during the bear market at all, but it's gonna be in a very tough position when we have the next bull market. Because SegWit improve the capacity by say 40 to 70%, depending on what assumption you make in your estimation. So it can go a bit higher, but not that much higher, not 10 times higher, certainly not.
You can feed like 4 times as many transactions.
Well, not really. So that's the theoretical limit. But if you want to do that, you need to craft very special transactions that have very special properties. In practice, if you look at the kind of transaction most people do, you can look at that and you can estimate that it's going to be 40 to 70% capacity increase.
Unless the Lightning Network gets adopted, we will see. I mean, it seems it's getting traction, but it's not being adopted significantly. I don't think there's that many Bitcoins right now on the Lightning Network. And apart from that, it's a totally different system.
The day you decide to go Lightning, you essentially decide to press the reset button on adoption, because it's a completely different system. Well, it's good for some use cases, but it certainly doesn't fit many use cases. So all the use cases first where you transfer a large amount of money, and by large I don't mean millions of dollars, but I'd say probably anything that is $100 plus is going to be an issue, because the liquidity you start to need becomes absurdly high. So if you want to do like $100 transfer, you need to have $100 of liquidity in every single hop along the way. And because those hops are not just serving you, but serving a bunch of people, then you can make estimation about how much money need to be locked on those channels, and very, very quickly you get to absurd numbers that even are higher than the market cap of the coin. So that it's not gonna work for large amounts. There is also all kind of use cases where, because you have to be online to receive a payment, there are all kind of use cases where it just doesn't work. Like, you cannot put a Lightning address on your YouTube channel, for instance, so that people can tip you there. It's not a use case that works.
Yeah, and then again, if it's only for micro payments, but then you want to send, even if it's a couple $1,000, if it's not going to work on the Lightning Network, and transactions of $1,000, it's so it happens all the time in these cycles when the bubble comes for Bitcoin. People transfer a few thousands every time from the exchange and outside and to the wallet and
absolutely, yeah.
It's thousands of dollars that you move in one time. So the Lightning is not.
But this kind of stuff is just not going to work with Lightning, because the liquidity you need is absolutely absurd. There is more than that, and I find it very interesting because I've tried to explain that many times, and it's just don't seem to register to most people. But there is an amplifying effect. Right, so you have demand because of speculation or use or whatever, right? And the demand varies all the time. But then what happens is that when the demand increases, the price increases, right? So far it's not very complicated. But then you have various businesses that make their income in crypto, right? Miners are the most obvious one, but any payment processor that take a fee on the transaction or whatever, all those people, they make income in crypto, and they need to sell part of their crypto to pay the rent and salaries and electricity bills and whatever. And when the price go up, they need to sell less crypto to pay for those stuff. Which means that now the supply decreases, right? So when you see an increase in demand on most market, when there is an increase in demand, for instance, say I want to buy oil, right? So there is like new demand for oil for whatever reason. I have a new use case for oil and I want to buy oil. What's going to happen is that I'm going to buy oil, the price go up. And then because the price goes up, people that drill to find more oil are going to be incentivized to drill more and get more oil out of there, right? Maybe they're going to go in more remote location where it's more expensive to drill or could not do it before. So the supply of oil over a few months is going to increase as well. But in Bitcoin and crypto, the opposite happens. When when the demand increases, the price go up, and therefore those companies that make crypto, they sell less, so the supply goes down. So the price go up even more.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's why you enter these crazy cycles, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why you enter, and the same happens the other way around, right? So when the price go down, they need to spend more on their expenses, and so suddenly the price goes down even more, right? And so when it goes down, it stops when some company go bankrupt or some company downsize, which is what we see happening right now, right? You have like Shapeshift that downsized, Bitmain downsized, many other company downsized, and also company bankrupt, right? So everybody is downsizing or going bankrupt right now, which is, it seems bad, but it's actually good, because this is how you stop the falling knife, right? And it seems to be more or less stabilizing now that those companies have done that. So it's bad news, but in some way it's good news as well for the market as a whole, right? Yeah, so you get those crazy effects, and the way you dampen those effects is more legitimate. People using it as money, actually, because people using it as money as the curve in the right direction. When the price of Bitcoin increase or also crypto increase, suddenly people buy more stuff with crypto because they just are richer, and so when you have more money, you buy more stuff.
More, of course, yeah.
Yes. And so this is good. This is going in the right direction, right? So when the price increase, then people that use it as money start spending more, which also increase the supply. And so we saw those. We still see those huge swing because the people using it as money have less economic weight than the other people in the market. If you want to dampen that, you need to increase the size of people using it as money.
Exactly. That was the whole idea since the beginning. Since I discovered Bitcoin, I saw this already. I mean, it would be super volatile, and the more use that it is, the more it's going to stabilize. But of course, it can take decades. Yeah. Okay, this one. Will the patents from Craig Wright have affect ABC and the crypto market, including new projects coming up? So will this patent affect ABC and the crypto market?
So, well, it's a question about the future. It's a bit difficult to answer. I've not looked at all the patents, but most of them would have a very hard time. Like all the one I looked at would have very hard time standing up in court because they patent stuff that have been used in the crypto space for a very long time. And essentially everybody is using, and everybody was using before the patent were filed. So it would not be very difficult to present. So in the patent world, there is that stuff called prior art. So if you can demonstrate to a judge that there is what we call prior art, so there is someone that did something that is similar to what is described in the patent before the patent was filed, then it's prior art and the patent is not valid. Uh, so for all the one I've looked at, there clearly is prior art. So that wouldn't be that much of a problem. Though what is a risk? What is a risk is that they go to various company and they say you infringe, like 100 patent of us or some stupid number of that, like that, and then you can sue the company, and if the company is small enough, it doesn't matter if they win. So I don't know if you're familiar with Blim. So Blim was a software where you could play PlayStation games on your computer, like an emulator. But if you want to do that, and if you want to do that legally, you need more than an emulator. You need an emulator, but you need to rewrite the firmware of the console and all of that, run it to the emulator and all of that. And they did not use anything from Sony. They implemented everything. And so then they had this product that they could sell where you could play a PlayStation game on your computer. And Sony was obviously not very happy with it because some people would play PlayStation on their computer instead of buying a PlayStation, right? But they did nothing illegal because they redid everything from scratch. And so if you buy the game legally, then everything is legal. But what they did is that they went in court against Blim in many different countries all at the same time. So they went against them in the UK, in France, in Germany, in the US, in Canada, and in Spain as well. Like they went against them, in like 10 or 20 different countries, something stupid. And at the end, Blim did not lose any of those cases, but Blim doesn't exist anymore. Why? Because it was, I think, like a 15% company or something like that. It was, fairly small company. And when you're a company of that size, you cannot sustain lawsuit in 20 different countries at the same time. It's just like it's not possible. You don't have enough resources to do that when you are a company of that size. And so they more or less forced Blim to close. And they didn't win any of the court case, but it doesn't matter because they got what they wanted. And so what is a possibility is that Enchain use similar strategy against company that they don't like.
Let's see how it develops. Okay, next question here. He says, I want to know the future of difficulty adjustment and when and how to decouple from BTC mining profitability, if possible, and if not, why?
Okay, so no, it's not possible. And why is very simple. If you use the same hardware to mine Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah.
Right? So if it's more profitable at some point in time to mine Bitcoin, then people are gonna start with part of the hardware to mine Bitcoin instead of Bitcoin Cash, and vice versa. If it becomes more profitable to mine Bitcoin Cash, then part of the people that are mining Bitcoin are going to switch the hardware to mine Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah.
And so what happened as a result is that the profitability of the two tend to be very close at any point in time.
Yeah.
And it's probably not going to decouple, right? Because if it decouples, then people are going to move, the difficulty is going to increase on one chain, decrease on the other, and you're going to find yourself at an equilibrium again.
Okay. And now he says, he's just asking if your position is only about the protocol and scaling, or if you're also involved in tokens.
No, I'm not very involved with tokens. I'm more involved in protocol and scaling. So there is more than enough to do at that level.
Okay. And another question: are the wormhole and the ERC721 tokens really dead?
I don't think so, but I am really not the best person to ask that because as I just said, I'm not that involved in tokens, and there is a lot of things going on with token. these days, and I cannot follow it all. So I'm really not the best person to answer that.
To ask this, okay, no problem. What else we have here? Cain says, when do you expect Bitcoin Cash to have removed enough bottlenecks to allow for sustained 128 megabyte blocks and eventually 1 gigabyte blocks?
This is a hard one because this is difficult to give a date. I'm going to explain the reason why. The reason why is that I'm not working on that personally, and most of the people I work with are not working on that at the moment. Why? Because we try to pick the highest impact tasks that we can do, given the resource we have. And right now, what seems to us to be the biggest impact tasks are improving zero-conf. Because we've reached a level where we can process block big enough so that we can grow very significantly before it's a problem. And so if we add more resources, we'd be working on that. But right now, with the resources we have, it's better to, so first there is like all kind of maintenance that need to be ongoing. And second, improving zero-conf is going to be the main stuff. Now, if we want to do bigger block faster and remove the bottlenecks for those, it's very simple, and there is not that many ways people can go about it. If you know how to code and understand those problems, then it's open source, so you can submit patches, and it's gonna go faster if you do it. If you are not, you may want to hire someone to do it, or even you can help with tasks that don't require coding, such as testing and stuff like that. And the more people we have to help or to fund people that help, then the faster it's going to go. But at the time, we're very much focused on improving zero-conf. So
I think that's more important. I mean, why is people so obsessed with block size?
I think people are very obsessed with block size because it was such a big issue before, and they don't want it to become the same kind of. It's
okay,
not like it's something.
What's the capacity for 32 megabytes? What would need to be the block size to be PayPal volume? 32 megabyte, 128.
Sorry, maybe 64 meg would be PayPal volume, something like that. So 32 megs is like PayPal ballpark. Yes. The problem is, by the time we are that big, it's going to be much more difficult to change the block size. So I would rather, given enough resources, I would rather also do it right now. But the reality of the situation is that we don't have enough resources to do it right now.
Okay. So another one, it says here, if shorten block time, the block time from 10 minutes to 1 minute can attract much more people to use Bitcoin Cash. Would you do it?
It would have to have a lot of support. And it's not a given that there is that much support. There are also a lot of so there is a subgroup of the BCH community that want to decrease the block time. But so far there are many problems that are not very clearly addressed. For instance, there are functionality to block coins based on block height. So if midway you change the block time, then all those scripts are gonna start to behave in a way that people that wrote them don't expect at all. There are, I don't say that all those stuff are all impossible, but there are a lot more things that need to be specified into a concrete proposal than what exists right now. And what is also not done very well in those proposals right now is all the motivation part, right? So when you want to change something, before actually making a technical proposal, you need to define, I'd say, two different things. The first one is going to be try to define the problem that you're trying to solve, right? Because maybe there are other technical solutions that would also solve that problem, but if you don't have defined the problem that you're trying to solve, there is no way to decide which solution is best.
Well, the problem for this case would be increase the confirmation waiting time, so that it doesn't take that long to confirm.
Yes, Yeah, so the second step would be use cases. So use cases and also a sizing of those use cases. So what is the amount of use cases that work when you have a 1 minute block time that do not work when you have a 10-minute block time, say? And what is the size of those use cases? It's not of use to me that the size is big, mostly because 1 minute is still way too long for, say, face-to-face interaction, for instance, right? So many of the use cases that require fast confirmation, they require something that is way faster than a minute.
Yeah.
And so it's not a given that going to 1 minute is going to solve that. And also, when you start going below a minute, there is like all kind of problems that start to creep up. And this is why we are focusing our effort more on technology like Avalanche than trying to shorten the block time, because Avalanche gives us finality in like about 2 seconds, okay, which is something we can never do. This is a kind of number we can never ever reach by decreasing the block time. It's way too fast. You decide that the block time is 2 seconds, nothing works anymore.
That is the answer. Thank you. So next one, how are you and the developers getting paid?
So it actually depends on a case-by-case basis. And I don't know that happens for everybody, but usually what happens is that you have people that sponsor various projects. So we have people that sponsor Bitcoin ABC. And so we can pay people to do work based on the amount they sponsor there. And then there is an obvious incentive to not go too much against people that sponsor. We structured everything. We structured everything around structured data non-profit, so we can only accept donations. We cannot do contracted work, so that limits a bit the power grab that can be done on what we do. It also limits, on the other end, the kind of donation that we can accept. So,
Yeah. That's true. And then he asks, is there any other tech other than Avalanche?
It's gonna come like in 3 months. In the next upgrade, we have Schnorr signatures. So that's something, I'm always a bit, it's always a bit strange because people are very interested into this kind of stuff. Like people talked about Seat all the time, for instance, and they're going to talk about Schnorr signature and stuff like that. But really, it's those are very infrastructure piece of stuff that most users don't really care about. And so it's probably a bit of a misfocus, I think, from the community to focus on those stuff too much. Like 99% of the user don't know what an electronic signature is, no matter if it's CCDSA or Schnorr or whatever, right? And they don't really care. And if they need to care, then it means that our UX is garbage, right? So, but back on Schnorr, Schnorr is a tech that's coming, and it has several benefits compared to the current signature that we're using. One is for scaling, because there is a techniques that allow you to validate many Schnorr signature at once. We call that batch validation. So say you have 10 signature, we can do some computation that's gonna say yes or no, those 10 signature are valid. And it's less expensive to do that than to check one signature 10 times. You know what I mean? So the more transaction we have, so essentially that's a way to verify signature in a way that scales better, because we can just take all the signature in the block, verify them all at once, and that tells us if the block is valid or not. We don't know what signature is not valid if one is not valid, but we don't really care. We know that the block is not valid. And so that's a way to process signature in the block more efficiently. So that's going to allow us to scale bigger. So that's one reason we're doing it. And the second reason we're doing it is there are a lot of stuff that people can do with Schnorr signature that they cannot do with CDSA. stuff like multisig, for instance. So what you can do with Schnorr is that you can create a special public key that doesn't belong to one person, that doesn't have one private key for one person, but actually several people have their own private key and public key, and they can use a mathematical process to combine them together to create like a combined public key of everybody. And then you can create a signature, and to create the signature, those different parties are going to have to cooperate to create the signature. So effectively, this is like a multisig, except for everybody else, except the people doing it, it looks like a regular public key and a regular signature for that public key. Like nobody knows if it's a multisig or not. And so it's better for privacy, and it's better also for scalability, right? Because to sign for some coin to be spent, those 10 people, each of them have to provide one signature, right? But now you can create a specific kind of signature that those 10 people have to cooperate, and the result of the computation is just a regular Schnorr signature that have nothing different from any other Schnorr signature. And so you can put that on the chain, and everybody's going to verify that this signature is valid without even having to know that 10 people participated to do it. So it increases privacy, but it also makes things more efficient.
All right, nice. Let's see what else we have here. It says, what is your relationship with Jihan Wu and your opinion on Bitmain involved in Bitcoin Cash?
I've talked with Jihan Wu many times, a bit less recently because like there are so many stuff to deal with on his side. He is definitely an extremely smart guy, though sometimes it's a bit difficult because the Western culture and the Chinese culture is very different. So nothing works. Nothing works like you'd expect, at least from a startup. But I'm pretty sure the same happened the other way around, right? Because Bitmain is a very Chinese company, and so actually I've seen many times working for a company in Western country trying to expand their operation in China and having a lot of trouble doing that because everything works differently. And I think Bitmain has a bit of the same problem the other way around. Bitmain is a very Chinese company, very successful in China, but I think they don't have a very good image in the Western world. A lot of people blame them for kind of stuff, and I think most of it is due to them not really, mastering very well all the social codes and stuff like that of the West more than anything else. But I would definitely vouch for Jihan. It's like with some special level of smart and understand things about crypto very well. It's also generally, I believe his intention to be very good.
Okay, so yeah, and then he said what's your opinion on Bitmain involvement in Bitcoin Cash? Because they're still involved in Bitcoin Cash, yeah?
Yeah, though they have downsized many operations, but all over the board, not just, just BCH related stuff. Even though people within the BCH ecosystem, they see that more because this is what they're interested in. There is a bit of a, like bubble aspect to it.
Yeah.
The truth is the mining market is not like it was, a year or two ago. And so Bitmain has to adapt to the reality of the situation. And many other companies have to do that. Actually, I think it speaks very greatly of Bitmain that they are fairly public about it. Even though the communication around that has been, maybe a bit confusing sometimes, but at least they are open about it. But every single company in the space right now is facing similar issue.
Yeah. Yeah, the mining.
And yeah, like the market is not just as good as it used to be, and so every company that is serious about the business that they are running has to downsize. That's
well, it happened to every. It's not only in mining; it happened to every blockchain. Estimate as well.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw it. They had to downsize like 70% of the people they had to let go, and many other blockchains. It happens all. Yeah, it's happening everywhere.
A lot of people had to downsize, and that's
the reality.
That's the reality. The market is not as good as it used to have, so people has to downsize.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't, you're gonna go bankrupt.
Of course, yeah. Okay, I think I'm gonna finish with all these questions. We've been talking for almost 2 hours now.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah, I think we can leave it here. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And
no problem.
Yeah, do you want to add anything else for the viewers, maybe, or anything else you want to add?
A lot of people ask, like when moon or when is the price gonna go up? Why is the bear market and stuff like that? And this is a very passive. I'd say this is a very passive way of looking at things. And I would encourage people to not ask themselves that question, but instead ask, what would need to happen for the bull market to return? Like what needs to happen for the bull market to return? And then do that.
Actually,
answer that question. Yeah, and then do that. And this is all the bull market returns. There is a lot of people building right now. Actually, the bear market is probably the best time to build, because all the people that are here for attention, or that are here because they see an opportunity to grab money or whatever, those people, they are not here right now.
That's right.
Right now, you have all the people that want to build. And so if you want to get involved and build something, this is the best time ever. And if you want the bull market to return, this is also what you need to do.
That's right. People, just do something about it. I mean, if you want the bull market to come back, just build something, or you can promote as well on YouTube. That's easier than coding.
Yeah. When I say build something, it can be programming, but it can be making a business. It can be convincing more people to accept crypto. It can be, there is a ton of stuff that one can do. That is not just programming, but people need to do those stuff. This is all the bull market returns, essentially, that's
absolutely, it's true. All right, so yeah, okay, so we'll leave the interview here. Thanks so much again, and yeah, I'll see you next time.
Ciao.
Thank you.